Welcome to the Disruptive Social Care Podcast with social care provocateur and social media queen Shirley Ayres and myself, Stuart Arnott, founder of Mindings, a service dedicated to bringing social media to the disconnected. In this fortnightly show, we aim to spread the word about what's going on in the world of disruptive social care, amplify the voices of people with great ideas that few people ever hear about, and to help our communities connect and collaborate. Well, hello, Shirley. Yes, show number 7. I'm getting a bit overexcited there. Over 1,300 listens and views, and I noticed 6 5-star reviews on iTunes. That's not bad, is it?
I think we're doing pretty well, and I think combined with a wonderful summer of sporting fun, it has been quite inspiring.
Yeah, well, I love the Paralympics, I have to say.
Yes.
And I loved the closing ceremony. Even though Danny Boyle set the bar very high, I thought the closing ceremony was better, certainly better than the Olympic closing ceremony. I loved it. But my biggest problem with the Paralympics was that they made me like athletics, Boris Johnson, Seb Coe and Coldplay. Probably the latter was the bigger crime.
Yes.
I thought that Disability Horizons did a terrific job of curating the best posts about the Paralympics. So I wanted to give them a shout out.
I quite agree.
Because they were on the show a couple of weeks ago, and if you're like me, if you're one of these people who likes watching the television and having the iPad by your side, they were great. They were a great accompaniment. They were doing a great job of curating some of the best posts and commentary about that. So shout out to Martin Sibley, Shrin Madipali and Mark Phillips for that.
Yes, I think the coverage was really important because it, not just sort of what was happening on the television, but all the commentary added another dimension to the whole event.
Yeah, it was great. Well, the one thing I wanted to talk about was the change in perception of disabled people that the Paralympics has brought about. And for me, it started with the controversial Frankie Boyle during the opening ceremony. He said, "Nobody thinks it's a good thing to laugh at the disabled, but it's a genuine problem that we're not allowed to laugh with the disabled." And then Channel 4 broadcast The Last Leg. And I don't know if you caught much of that.
I thought it was really good, yes.
I thought it was amazing. Adam Hills and Alex Brooker did an amazing job. And for me, it was what Channel 4 used to be like.
Yes. Actually, quite cutting edge.
It really was.
Yes.
And I really liked that Channel 4 reacted once they realised that they had a hit on their hands. Yes. And they just decided to turn the whole of Channel 4 and More 4, and they turned the whole thing over to the coverage of the Paralympics. That was great.
I think Channel 4, their coverage of the Paralympics was superb.
It absolutely was. It was terrific. My favourite feature on The Last Leg was and you'll like this, it was hashtag. Hashtag is it okay? And yes. They were getting people, and it started off very tame, and then as it went on, people started reacting to that. It was great. So it would end up with like, is it okay to kneel down when you have your picture taken with Ellie Simmons?
Yes.
Which is the kind of question that you just wouldn't dare ask until that show. It was great. And Adam Hills told this funny story. It was about an Australian who lost both legs in a car crash, and he went on to win Olympic gold. And he was asked by an interviewer if that had always been his dream. And he replied, "Well, not when I had my bloody legs, mate." That was great. And that's a joke that would both be kind of shifting uncomfortably and looking at our shoes. But I thought it was very good. I think Rio's going to have a tough job, though. I think they're going to have a tough job because we, and I'm proud to say we as in the British, raised the bar so highly with the staging and the broadcasting of the Paralympic Games. Because for me, the perception of the Paralympics has gone from historically sympathy.
Yes.
And I think that the Special Olympics might have to consider a name change. And it went from sympathy to this kind of awkward mid-stage of heroic tragedy.
Yep.
Which even at the beginning of the Channel 4 coverage, immediately preceding the opening ceremony, they were telling the stories of soldiers standing on, exploding devices, and there was a person who was in the 7/7 London tube tragedy. And so it went from sympathy to heroic tragedy very quickly into inspiring athleticism.
Yes.
And I thought that was amazing. So we went from, instead of it being about these people being tragic and being heroic, we were just talking about how dedicated and focused Ellie Simmons was and what a great role model she was to young women and to swimmers, and talking about what great athletes David Weir and Johnny Peacock are. And then it went on to more interesting discussions like, should Oscar Pistorius be allowed into both Olympics because he's so damn fast? And, is the cyclist Sarah Storey disabled enough? Because, she actually trains, with Olympians, and how cool is wheelchair rugby?
Oh, yes.
So I thought that was great. I thought it was an incredible change of perceptions, and you can't go back from that. You can't go back from that. We've raised the bar. These terrific Paralympians are just great athletes, and you cannot go back from that.
And I think they have a lot of style and a lot of class. I mean, how the interviews were conducted, their obvious enthusiasm, their passion, and their commitment was so impressive.
Absolutely. Claire Balding was fantastic. I think she's definitely demonstrated that she's one of Britain's finest broadcasters.
Absolutely, yes.
So that was great. So Shirley, what's been happening this week in the world of social care?
Well, it's all action. I think starting with the cabinet reshuffle, where of course we've lost Andrew Lansley as the Minister of Health to be replaced by Jeremy Hunt, and we've lost Paul Burstow, the Care Minister, and Tim Loughton, who was leading on social care reform and children's services. So a very new team in health and social care. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, because this is, the suggestion has been that social care remains a low priority with the government.
Well, that's disappointing.
But they have got in Norman Lamb as the new Care Minister, who has a lot of respect and a good background. He was the Liberal Democrats' health minister for many years. So we're not bringing in someone who is totally unfamiliar with what the issues are. So, I retain a sense of optimism about the future on this one.
Watch the space.
Oh, yes. And I'd also like to mention the Social Innovation Camp meetup, which we both attended, of course.
Yes, I'm sorry for running in the door and running out again, but we'll touch on that later.
Yes, I'd like to hear more about that. But it was such a fascinating subject, talking about what is the potential for new startups to get involved in social care. And of course, two of the critical issues that come up is, first of all, that social care is a very fragmented sector and a very complex sector, with different funding streams and lots of different people involved. So there were some very, very good comments on Twitter about SciCamp. I'm from @Mr. James Portius. In a startup, you can build something in the time it takes to convince a client to let you start in a large organisation. And this really has, significance if we're trying to get innovation into public services. How long does it take? What are the processes? How can we make it easier for people to be innovative? One of my favourites, oft quoted, I'm afraid, Stuart, but part of my marketing background. There may be a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap?
True.
Worth thinking about for all new businesses. So I think, that marketing has to be such an important part of people's startup plans. It's not just about the idea and developing it. You've actually got to check out whether there's a market for it.
Absolutely. If they build it, they will come? No.
Yeah, no. Well, not in our experience.
Only if you're Apple, and pretty much no one else.
Well, yes. And a good reminder from Claire O.T., who was on the panel with me, that we do need to take advantage of what's already out there. And she gave the great example of Maps and Apps. I think it was over 500 ideas submitted to the Department of Health, chosen, the top ones chosen by a panel. So that was just the starting point, really, for there is a lot out there. And I suppose the other, the sort of thing that links with that about what's already out there is that from Amanda Gore, the Design Council, how do you stop doing pilots and actually get these social apps out there? Absolutely.
And I was at the King's Fund. It was the Congress on Telecare in March, and at that one, Nick Goodwin presented the results of the whole system demonstrator. And basically the conclusion at that event was, can we stop doing trials now?
Yeah.
can we just get on with it? Because there are so many papers being written, there are so many trials being done, it works. Can we just move on to the next discussion and just crack on with it?
We've got to stop duplicating. We've got to stop the pilots. I quite agree with you. We've got to move to embedding some of these fantastic technology innovations into mainstream provision. And that continues to be such a big challenge. Also, I'd like to mention a couple of great posts from the SciCamp event, and a good summary about the potential for startups, which was actually written by SciCamp, and a really interesting post from David Floyd at David Social SP. The best apps you've never heard of and wouldn't think to buy. Probably if you've never heard of them, don't know they're available. And he asks a number of interesting questions. How do we close the gap between innovative ideas and everyday practice in social care, and actually similar sectors? It's not just social care. How can people developing new social innovations get them into mainstream markets, particularly when these markets are dominated by the state? Although, I think in some ways this is changing, because there are a lot of self-funders in the market. They estimate that they're paying $5.5 billion to buy care in the marketplace. So it is a huge market. I'm going to discuss this a little more in a moment. How can we find the balance between sharing information about socially useful products that are already out there and putting resources into developing new ones? And this is a particular interest for me because, as you know, I'm just doing a piece of work looking at 50 technological ideas that could improve social care services tomorrow. And so it is, where the scale of investment should be. And can we develop socially useful digital products that will be sustainable businesses based on people wanting to pay to use them?
That's a big question.
It is a very, very big question. So coming on to Gary Hayward asked a couple of questions before the event about covering research and development costs. And I suppose I'd just like to comment that a lot of the funding for innovation in social care is being funded by Nesta, Nominate Trust, Big Lottery Fund, Economic and Social Research Council, Technology Strategy Board, Design Council, Department of Health, and the European Union. So it's worth keeping an eye on all of these organisations, possibly a full-time job in itself.
I can tell you it is. It is.
And also, market development and startups in the care sector is being explored by the Think Local Act Personal Partnership, who've written a number of reports, but nothing yet, surprisingly, on the potential of digital technology to improve the lives of older people. So we've got a significant disconnect between mainstream social care organisations and innovators, which that's one of the gaps that we really got to look at. So supporting good ideas to become scalable solutions requires a knowledge of the care sector, funding streams, how public services are commissioned, and information about the growing self-funders market. So as a tech entrepreneur in the care sector, I'd be really interested in your thoughts on this, Stu.
Well, it certainly made me laugh when you're reading out that long list of funding organisations, because what certainly isn't going to happen is that these groups are going to get together and say, oh, you're doing something similar to what we're doing. Why don't we put our budgets together and I'll just resign because we're clearly doing the same job. I feel that there are quite a few self-interest quangos and fiefdoms out there that are more interested in self-preservation. I'm never going to get funding from any of these organisations ever now as a result of that, but I think it's true.
Well, I think it's an interesting one. I am aware that at some levels these organisations do work together. You look at some projects and they've been funded by Nesta and the Nominate Trust and the Big Lottery Fund, etc., etc. But my view is that we do not have one organisation who are tasked with bringing together and collating all of the projects and the information and making them accessible in one location. So that's where I think there's the danger of duplication. And when we don't have the resources to keep reinventing the wheel, keep doing pilots. We've really got to get some of this really great technology embedded into mainstream services as a matter of urgency.
Absolutely. And there is a problem there. It's similar to government funding business support. That Doug Richards, the serial entrepreneur and former Dragon's Den dragon, he once described the business support service as a business in itself. And he was saying that of the, 12 billion a year that was being spent on business support, probably about 2 billion of that is completely wasted. It's letting people know that these organisations exist. It's a business in itself.
I think one of the comments that certainly a number of new social enterprises have said to me is that there does seem to be a lot of advice around, but what they need is some money. To fund the proof of concept, and it seems that they don't need a lot of money to do it in the first stage. And once they've got the proof of concept, what they then need is the support to actually access, in social care, the social care market, and to understand the complexity of it. Yeah. And I think one of the problems is that, especially for young people brought up in a digital age, they're very aware of the power of digital marketing. But as an old school marketer and as a social worker, definitely for me about communication, there is something to be said for going out and talking to people rather than trying to do it all through digital channels. And so I honestly think that one of the best things that people can do is go and talk to people locally. Is this a good service? Would you purchase it? What sort of, that basic and core market research. And so rather than all of these different sort of funding bodies getting people to waste a lot of time submitting multiple applications, I think, as you say, Stu, it needs a different approach. The funding market needs as much disruption as social care, I would suggest. Well,
I was at an event, I think it was last year. I hope I haven't told this story before, but it's one I tell often. And it was a fund that the Technology Strategy Board were setting up, and they were giving £1 million to startups, and they were looking for ideas. And they got Guy Kawasaki in, who was on a book tour promoting his book, Enchantment. And he's written a phenomenal book called Art of the Start. That's pretty much the Bible of our business startup.
It's going in our bookstore, I assume.
It will be going in our bookstore. I'll be putting a post up about that specifically, because anybody who's involved in starting up a business, that's the only book you need on your shelf, frankly. So he was there promoting his new book, Enchantment, and they were offering Technology Strategy Board 10 times £100,000 to a good idea. And Guy Kawasaki was sitting there smiling and shaking his head, and one of the people who was on the panel, I'm not going to name names because I don't particularly want to fall out with them, but they asked him why he was shaking his head, and he said, why are you giving 10 times 100,000? Why don't you give 50 times 20,000? If you give somebody £100,000, they'll get themselves a swanky office, a receptionist, and they'll commission a design agency to make them a logo instead of doing it from the kitchen sink. Get a logo from 99 Designs, and because they don't have the money, they'll build it quickly and they'll deploy it, and they'll see whether the idea floats or not. So that kind of lean startup approach is something which I think is important, and that is something which the government could fund, because they're just talking about lots of small amounts of money and not £1 million at a time, which is just silly, really.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. It's a different approach that I think is urgently needed. And I would certainly, you can do so much on a laptop from your bedroom today. You don't need all the peripheries of a business just to get an idea out there. And I think the other thing is, if it's only a small amount of money invested, if it isn't the right idea, you can change it a lot more flexibly. I think about all these government websites that have cost hundreds of thousands of pounds to develop, and possibly it's then hard to say, but actually it doesn't work particularly well, because a lot of people have got a lot invested because so much money has been spent.
Yeah, it's a very American West Coast thing. It's a very kind of Californian thing, actually, is that failure is celebrated. Getting an idea out there and trying it and failing and learning and pivoting and relaunching is a big thing. It's what kind of lean startup's all about, and we don't seem to have that culture over here. Failure is a bad thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, the blame culture, I think, stops a lot of innovation happening. Yeah.
Whereas in Silicon Valley, if you go to somebody for funding and you haven't failed, they'll not want to fund you because they'll think that this is going to be your failure. They'd like to see you failed because they equate failure with learning.
Yes.
So.
Lessons for us all, methinks. But I want to hear more about your your tech startup adventures in the last few weeks.
Well, yeah. So I was on holiday the last week or two, but I had a presentation I had to do right in the middle of the holiday, and it was as I call it, a trains and boats and planes day, because I was up in Scotland with my family, so I had to come back down to go to Guildford, and it was an event. It's something called the Set Squared Investment Showcase, and the Set Squared is a collaboration between the universities of Bath, Bristol, Essex, Exeter, Southampton and Surrey, and they spin in and spin out businesses and help them get funding. So the University of Surrey have adopted us with Mindings as one of their projects, and we went there in order to present at an event that they're having in October, which is one of the largest collections of angel investors and VCs, etc., for funding. And we have made it down to the final 20. And so that 10-minute presentation I had to do on that day, we've been selected as one of the 8 who will get to present at that day.
That's very impressive. Well done.
So that's great. Well,
and I hope it's being videoed.
I might have to sneak a camcorder in. Yeah. But it's great. It's nice to think that we're sufficiently highly thought of to make it as one of these 8 presenting slots. And
well deserved, Stu, I have to say, with Mindings.
Well, we have been described by Tech Radar as one of the 20 hottest startups in the UK, of course.
Blimey. This is why I'm sitting with you here today. I like to be with the hot startups.
Oh, and also, just the week before, and it was just after the recording of the last show, we were featured at the Startup Britain event in Tech City, and that was really interesting. It was part of the National Startup Britain campaign, and it was the Startup Games, and it was in the Silicon Roundabout Tech City area, and with the backdrop of the 2012 Paralympic Games, some of the best entrepreneurs and best startups in the business came to Hackney House to show off. The idea was to show off the talent and innovation that Britain has to offer, and so we got offered a slot on an event that they're doing called Don't Pitch Me Bro, and we were the last. Now that was the night, that was the SciCamp night. That was
that's why you were rushing between the two events.
That's why I had to go rushing out the door and waving at Claire OT as I go out the door saying, sorry, I'll catch you next time. But so we went along and we got the last slot of the night, and it was terrifying because it was like a big circus tent. Everybody was sitting at the table chatting to each other, and I thought, this is going to be horrific. It's going to be like doing a stand-up comedy gig when you're the last one and everybody's drunk. And so I stepped up and I started doing my presentation, and one of the first slides I have is a picture of my dad and my daughter, and the room went silent. And I thought, I've got them. And I did my presentation, and what they wanted at the event was you to ask questions of the audience to get some reaction. So I asked them, who do you think your customer is? And we kind of identified it as, if you're into marketing in micro niches, they are dutiful sons and alpha daughters. Because normally if there's a group of people in a family and they're looking after an older family member, there's usually one daughter who's the one who will take charge of the whole thing. So that's what they are. And what was the other question was, are we an app or a service, a device or a service? And the third question was, is Mindings social care or social cool? Because we've been thinking of this as just a social care, and a few people have later been saying, but what you're doing is actually quite cool. And it was very pleasing because in that event full of trendy, Shoreditch, Tech City startups, the reaction was that what we were doing was social cool. So that was really nice. So it's given me an awful lot to think about.
I love it. Social care and social cool. How about that?
Social care and social cool.
Yes. Oh, well done. How exciting.
That was a good one. And in mentioning Claire OT, as I did there, as I rushed out the door and ignored her, she did a really good post the other week called The Social Model of Disability, which we'll put a link on the show notes to have a look at. And a couple of things that she touched on is one of the key things to understand about the social model, which we're talking about, is the difference between disability and impairment. That was very interesting. And also how to behave around disabled people. And she included a disability etiquette primer, which I found very useful. particularly because not coming from a care background, I usually take great care to be careful and respectful with language. And I was once corrected for saying suffering from dementia instead of living with dementia. I'm still not sure if that works for Alzheimer's, but maybe I'll ask Claire about that. But you know, it's interesting. There's interesting questions there about language. So, you know, is Matt Fraser, who's the drummer who performed Spasticus Artisticus in the opening ceremony of the Paralympics, and he played with Coldplay in the closing ceremony, is he a thalidomide victim, as The Sun described him the next day in the newspaper? Or is he a disabled writer, actor and musician? Or, if you look at his Twitter page, he describes himself as a showbiz crip flid.
Yes, challenging questions for us all.
Normally at this point in the show we would have an interview, but unfortunately Mel Findlater from UCAN Hub had a footballing accident.
Oh dear.
And she could not hobble from Cambridge all the way into London, so we'll hopefully pick her up at a later show.
And best wishes to Mel for a speedy recovery.
Absolutely. So we just thought we'd continue our chat, and there was a really good post that I read by Jeremy Wilson on Kernel magazine, and it asked the question, what can tech companies do to enrich the lives of older people? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's probably stating the obvious, but strangely, older people are not one homogenous group. Lots of different people with hopes, aspirations, and so taking the time to understand the needs of an ageing population should be essential for all of those who seek to improve society through technology. It's very strange, you know. It sort of all veers a bit onto thoughts about stereotypes and assumptions about older people. And as Jeremy says, you know, if technology can reattach people to a world that is slipping away from them, it's a job worth doing. And the private sector should be on it. Because after all, the elderly might be lonely, but many of them are surprisingly, albeit secretly, liquid. So, you know, I think this would be an interesting debate with the tech companies. And I think some answers also to the question about why access to the internet and digital technology is important for social care. Two very interesting studies. One that finds that internet use cuts depression in older people. Elderly people who regularly use the internet are less likely to suffer from depression. New research from the University of Alabama has found regular internet usage in retired Americans aged 50 and older reduced depression by 20 to 28% and helped promote mental well-being among this group. And computers cut dementia risk. Having access to a personal computer lowers or decreases the risk of cognitive decline and dementia in older men by up to 40%, according to researchers at the University of Western Australia. And the study found that the risk of dementia was about 30 to 40% lower among older computer users than non-users, and the findings could not be attributed to age, education, social isolation, depression, or overall health. So, you know, it's interesting, there's an increasing number of studies actually looking at the benefits of social networks, of the internet, of digital technology, and we will continue to highlight them.
Yeah, so as I say, it's good to talk, but
yes,
more fundamentally, it's just good to communicate. It's
yes,
good to be connected.
Yes, both online and in real life, one has to say.
Absolutely. And sometimes one can lead on to the other.
Yes.
This section of the programme is called Follow Friday, because it's Friday that we release the show, but also because people who use Twitter use hashtag FF for Follow Friday to recommend people to their community. Who do we have this week?
Before I give some recommendations, I'd just like to point out a lot of Twitter accounts appear at the moment being hacked. I'm receiving a lot of very dubious direct messages about my face, my fortune.
Oh, I've had a couple of them.
Right, well, that account's being hacked, and some excellent advice from Twitter. We'll put a link up on the show notes, but change your password. Oh. So, I mean, if anybody DMs you with one of these very strange DMs, tell them immediately and get them to change their password.
Oh, so I'll DM them back? And
yes.
Okay, so
yes,
that DM's not going to go to the person who hacked it. It will go to the person who actually sent it.
Yes,
oh,
yes.
Okay.
Or if they don't follow you, then just put a note up to them on Twitter. Definitely worth doing. You know, everybody gets their account hacked. I mean, mine's been hacked several times, but the sooner you can take action on it, the better.
Okay, will do.
And so this week I'm recommending some very good local government people on Twitter to follow. One of my favourite local authorities is Monmouthshire, who have opened up the use of social media for all staff, and they provide excellent guidance, support and training. And so at Monmouthshire CC is my first recommendation. And of course they have the chief executive at Paul Matthews 67, who is very active on Twitter.
Another tweeting chief executive.
Absolutely, yes. He leads from the front. And at MCC Simon Birch, their Director of Social Services, is also on Twitter. And a special shout out to at Hel Reynolds, who is their Communications Officer and who writes excellent blogs about public sector use of social media. Highly recommended. And one of her recent posts on a subject which evokes a lot of debate in the public sector, let's not dismiss online influence scoring altogether. Here we think about cred, about clout, about peer index, and what is their value for local government, the public sector.
Incidentally, Monmouthshire, they're so ahead of everyone else, and they kind of historically always seem to have been so far ahead. Why is that?
I think it's down to leadership. I mean, I think the leader of the council is also on Twitter. I think it's a real reflection of the senior management team at Monmouthshire. I think. I mean, they're the first Wikipedia city in the world, and it just feels so dynamic. But I think maybe it requires a very confident chief executive to be so open and encourage that level of debate.
Well, good for them. It's a beautiful part of the world. A very good friend of mine come from there. Yes. I've spent many nice holidays there, actually.
Well, I think there must be so many dividends in terms of people thinking, if I'm going to work anywhere in the country, Monmouthshire, is showing initiative, innovation, and really wants to attract top-notch people. So all credit to them.
Good for them.
And I'd also like to mention at Dansley, who generously shares his considerable knowledge and wisdom of local government communications. Dan works at Walsall Council, and he is also a contributor to the excellent At Comms 2.0. Nigel Bishop at Astroplaid, who organised the excellent Digital Futures conference held in Shropshire earlier this week. An excellent panel of contributors, some great quotes, which you can find #digifutures12. At Kate Bentham, who manages the Shropshire Family Information Service and uses social media to provide information and support to parents and carers of children and young people through the at Shrop Family Info. And finally, congratulations to Gordon Scobie at DCC Tayside, who received the Connected Cops Award for International Social Media Top Cop at the SMILE conference. SMILE standing for Social Media, the Internet and Law Informants.
Good for him. Good Scotsman there. Good Scotsman.
Yes.
You're very welcome.
Yes. Thoughts from you about Follow Fridays?
I've got a couple I wanted to mention. I'm not sure if he's been mentioned in a previous show, but if not, and even if so, I really enjoyed meeting Mark 1 and 4 at SI Camp. We had a really good chat in the bar afterwards. Really switched on. Here it's 1 and 4, England's only national mental health and wellbeing magazine, written by people who experience mental health difficulties.
Excellent publication.
Absolutely. It's a terrific magazine, but absolutely, if you're interested in that field, follow Mark 1 and 4. He writes great provocative posts. He does great curation of posts as well.
And subscribe to 1 in 4.
Absolutely. Check him out. And a special congratulations to the Disruptive Social Care podcast friend Chris Book for winning a Miffy Award for his application Bard Owl, which some describe as Spotify for books, and it won the most innovative app.
Impressive. Well done.
That's
well
great.
done to Bard Owl, yes.
So we'll put these details and other information about things that we've been talking about on the show notes, which are extensive show notes that we're out on the website, which again is at disruptivesocialcare.com. And please do check us out and follow us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/disruptive social care.
Indeed. Yes.
So Shirley, what do we have coming up in the next couple of weeks?
Oh, interesting times again. Blogger Norman McNamara, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 3 years ago when he was just 50 and is a very active campaigner about improving dementia services, is organising Dementia Awareness Day on the 17th of September. So we hope everybody will give their support to this really, really important awareness day.
Absolutely. Norman's a lovely man, really
Yes.
nice. I got some lovely tweets from him. He likes some nice poetry, he does some really good
Yes, he
videos.
does.
I've learned a lot from watching his
Yes.
videos.
A shout out at Whose Shoes for the excellent In My Shoes series, raising awareness of dementia, writing from professional service users and carers' perspectives. And interestingly, a free dementia module, which is available from Prep Online, which provides e-learning specifically for nurses, but actually with courses relevant to all staff working in care. So thanks to @Devauden for this. Especially if you're not sure what dementia is, this is a very good introduction. I'm attending the Online Influence Conference being held in Newport in Wales. I rarely attend social media conferences, but I was so impressed with the programme and the speakers, which includes Mark Schaefer, one of my social media influencers, and Andrew Grill, founder of Cred. And the conference can be followed on Twitter using #OIConf. Now, the other key thing, Social Media Week starts on the 24th of September with lots of interesting events, although many of them are booked out. And I'm particularly looking forward to attending the debate about whether public sector bodies and online activists can collaborate, which is being held on the 28th of September with the aforementioned at Mark 1 in 4 and Victoria Breton, who is a Deputy Chief Executive at a mental health trust. So that's me. So what about you? Are you attending any events?
I've got a couple coming up. Well, I'm presenting Mindings at the next Net to Cambridge meetup on Monday the 17th at Microsoft Research in Cambridge, talking about how technology can change the world by better connecting. That's a subject close to your heart. So I shout out to Mel Findlater there, who's one of the organisers of that. I hope I'll probably see her in plaster. I hope she's feeling okay there. And Francis Rowland, who are organising that. So it's nice of them to invite me to that. And I'm also attending an event called Get Your User Experience Right, which is organised by a group who also have that acronym, SMILE, which is Selected Mentors and Interns for London Enterprise, on Wednesday the 20th. That's a UCL, University College London, arranged event on Wednesday the 20th. And that's an afternoon workshop to explore user-centred design and how your product or service should be centred on the people that matter most, the customer. And that's with user experience experts Sedev Gavaz and Helen Morris. I'm looking forward to that.
Really interesting. Well, quite an action-packed 2 weeks coming up then, Stu.
Busy.
Yes. And on that note...
Yeah, remember, follow us. I'm Minding Stu.
And I'm Shirley Ayres.
And you can find us on our website, which is disruptivesocialcare.com, and our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/disruptivesocialcare.
And we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please help spread the word using the hashtag DEUKCare.
You can use a hashtag if you want, but I think you would better using a hashtag. Hashtag DEUKCare, and then we can follow. We actually make a point of searching and following these hashtags and do respond to these. So until the next show,
goodbye.
See you in a couple of weeks.